Hi, my name is Daniel, and in this video, I'm going to be sharing the story of my spiritual awakening, how I awoke to the truth of the spiritual nature of reality and why I'm here on planet Earth at this time. From a very intense trigger event to a deep dark night of the soul, uncovering latent abilities and uncovering my soul origins and my role in the shift to a higher plane of consciousness. I'm going to start with a little bit of background and some pre-awakening to give a little bit of context before diving into the really good stuff. So if you want to skip ahead to the more entertaining things, feel free to skip ahead using the timestamps below. So I will start with some backstory about my upbringing just to provide some context. I grew up in the United States of America in the suburbs of Orlando, Florida.
Orlando, I love you, Orlando.
You've got to go to Orlando and go to Universal Studios, Florida.
Yes, that Orlando. I grew up in a generally stable home life with two parents in the home, generally no major traumas to report. Everything was fairly stable, all of my material needs were met. I also had no spiritual or religious upbringing of note. Nothing was forced upon me in terms of religion or spirituality. I was basically just kind of left to uncover things on my own, just a blank slate to discover things as I wished. A common theme, though, throughout my upbringing was severe emotional repression. I believe I pretty much turned off all of my emotions around 2 or 3 years old, so that was a pretty common theme. But generally, I had a stable upbringing, friends, I went to school. I had generally ingrained in me to follow the standard life plan. Do well in school, go to college, get a good job, find a partner, marry that partner, have kids, so on and so forth. And when I came of age, I went to college essentially because that was what was expected of me. I didn't even think of any other alternatives. So I went to the Florida State University in Tallahassee, Florida, had the college experience, which means I essentially went to a bunch of football games, a lot of parties, and learned essentially nothing of use for my actual life after that. After graduation, I went back to my hometown of Orlando, Florida. For an internship, which was essentially a full-time job at what would be considered a prestigious company. And it only took about 3 months into that internship to where I found myself thinking, whoa, this is not right. I hate this. I found it completely insane that people were just living for the weekends. Everyone around me hated what they were doing. They were always complaining, talking about how they're looking forward for the weekend. They were dreading Mondays, but looking forward to Friday. I found it completely insane that I was the only one around me who figured out that working 5 days a week, doing something you hated just to enjoy 2 days a week made absolutely no sense. That just made absolutely no sense to me. I was completely dumbfounded and I felt something is truly profoundly wrong. But I shared these things with people in my circle and I kind of ingrained what was being fed back to me that, oh, this is just the way things are. You got to buy your time, you got to work your way up, things will get better, blah, blah, blah. And I internalized all of that. And essentially I just doubled down on it. After that experience in Orlando, I moved to Atlanta, Georgia.
Welcome to Atlanta where the players play and we ride on them things like every day. Big beats hit streets, see gangsters roaming and parties don't stop till 8 in the morning.
Where I spent the next 9 years of my life after graduating college. So I essentially continued on with the standard life plan, working jobs that I seriously hated, and essentially just tried to find my way in a big city, doing the standard thing that most people do, seeking out friends, trying to find romantic partners, doing all the cool things that a big city has to offer, discovering all the different ways that I can numb myself from realizing I don't like what I do most of the time. But in my late 20s, after ending a long-term relationship, I found myself diving deep into myself, beginning a very intense period of self-discovery. That concept of emotional repression, I guess, caught up to me, and I started realizing, whoa, like there's something here within me that needs exploring. I started diving into everything related to psychology and how to bring out these emotions that I'm not able to access. I did a round of internal family systems therapy. I started doing yoga for the first time, meditating for the first time regularly. I even went to a few Tony Robbins events, and it was at one of these Tony Robbins events that I felt really empowered and finally realized that I don't want to work any of these jobs that I hate. What I really want to do is something that had been in the back of my mind in my 20s is I really just want to explore and travel. I want to travel the world. So when I went to one of these events, I decided, yep, I'm going to quit my job, travel the world. And that's exactly what I did in the year 2019. I quit my job, sold all my stuff, and got a one-way ticket to Australia and went traveling for 8 months in 2019. It was very liberating at the time, but after 8 months, I basically ran out of steam, got tired of that. Who knew you can get tired of looking at amazing, wonderful sights and sceneries? But I did. Eventually, I realized I actually do kind of want some stability. I might want some people in my life. It was pretty lonely just traveling nonstop. So I ended up right where I started before that. I ended up back in Atlanta, Georgia, and essentially tripling down on the standard life plan. Found myself getting another corporate job that I knew wasn't what I really wanted to do, but essentially I got a better job with a higher title, better pay, and essentially moving up, being rewarded for this system of standard life plan. I ended up somehow getting rewarded for my choices and getting a better experience, a better job, more money, a better apartment, and all of that stuff. So I thought, well, let me just triple down on this and try again. So I started this new job in January of 2020, and 2 months later, the pandemic started, and I began working from home remotely all by myself. And as a byproduct of that, for months and months of spending the vast majority of my time alone, I dipped into a pretty noticeable depression. And that's when a lot of anxiety started coming to the surface for myself. And in the year 2021, I reached a very low point. Even though I was developing a blossoming social circle, I had a bunch of friends, I was very active on the weekends, the majority of my time was still spent all by myself, and a lot of stuff was just coming up to the surface, feeling a lot of anxiety and simultaneously still pretty depressed. I realized like I didn't even want anything. I was just kind of jaded and cynical about things, and I had really no desire. The only thing at that time I had a desire for was to investigate a concept or a field of psychology that I was spending a lot of time diving into, which is known as Jungian psychology or Jungian analysis, as a byproduct of the works of the psychologist Carl Jung. I was reading a ton of books by Jung and some of his proteges, and I was really drawn to that material and how it was a very poetic way of explaining one's consciousness and psyche. And there was a heavy emphasis on dream interpretation and the symbology that would show up in your dreams and in one's life. So I realized this is the only thing I have any sort of call to. So I decided to enlist the help of a professional in this field because I realized like I'm stuck here. I don't know what to do. I feel miserable. I feel stuck. And I decided to enlist the help of a professional in this field. And we began working together, uncovering what was lying dormant in my subconscious, uncovering various parts of myself, with a heavy emphasis on dream interpretation. But the main benefit, or the main point I realized looking back of why I was called to this, is that the psychoanalyst that I ended up working with had encouraged me to start experimenting with plant medicines. This man who I was working with said that based off of our time together, he realized I had a lot of rules in the way that my mind was operating. And he didn't recommend working with plant medicines for everybody, but he could tell that for me, based on the way I was living, that he really thought that it would help me. It would open things up. It would open up my mind and loosen up some of these rules that I had about the way I was operating. And perhaps there could be something that would open up by me trying some of these plant medicines. So I took his advice. I was already familiar with it and getting a little bit curious. Based off of what was most easily accessible living in the United States, I started microdosing psilocybin mushrooms. It was generally beneficial. I had realized it was easing a lot of my anxiety. It was giving me a lot more energy and kind of zest for life. But then what my psychoanalyst who I was working with really recommended that I experiment with was a plant medicine called iboga. And I started first microdosing with iboga, and that really opened up my dream space. I was getting almost clear, direct, word-for-word messages in my dreams, like, hey, explore this, look at that, or this is something that you should pay attention to in your life. I was getting a fair amount of success with working with these plant medicines. Nothing too, out of the ordinary. I wasn't taking any crazy macro doses just yet. So things were going fine in that regard, but I was still having a lot of anxiety come up to the surface, which I think was being aided by these plant medicines. And one day, again, after just realizing that I don't want to be doing what I'm doing in my life, working at a computer all day, every day by myself, I woke up in the middle of the night, almost in a panic, and I realized, with just a full body knowing, I have to leave Atlanta. I have to leave where I live right now. I feel claustrophobic. I just feel trapped in the density of concrete jungle. There's no nature. I knew I just needed to leave. And through a random happenstance of events, I found myself deciding to move to a very small beach town on the Florida Panhandle.
Can't be any worse than when we went to the Florida Panhandle. Oh, this shrimp is delicious.
Oh, God, my wife's choking! Is there a doctor in the house? College graduate? High school graduate? Some high school with vocational degree? Whoever gets the shrimp out of her windpipe can have it.
I moved to where I live now, not knowing anybody. I left behind where I lived in Atlanta, Georgia. All my immediate family lived there. I had a very large circle of friends. And I left all of that behind to move to where I live now, where I knew absolutely nobody. Is a town that was probably 1/50th the population size, but I knew I had to be by nature. I live very close to the beach, so I was called to that. But generally, it was just me by myself and my dog. And before I moved there, I had almost like a pre-awakening experience, which I'll touch on really quick. I found myself drawn to attend an event for network chiropractic. It was something that I've just seen some videos about. I heard Tony Robbins recommended it, and it's this energy practice where essentially these practitioners, without even touching your body, they make just kind of small little adjustments, touching your body here or there, and it can just open up your body to have really profound energetic releases. And I saw videos of people just like doing these like worm-like movements without anyone even touching their body. I had no clue what that even was, but I just felt like locked in, like I need to try that. I don't know why. Perhaps I would just recognize like I'm feeling kind of stuck on the inside. Maybe something like that could help me open up. So I found myself attending an event in Colorado in the beginning of 2022, just before I had moved. And at this experience, where I had 5 of these so-called entrainments by one of these chiropractic professionals, I literally had a psychedelic experience. After someone worked on me with basically not even touching my body, I ended up having to lie on the ground. And for about 45 minutes, I had a complete psychedelic experience. I had no control of my body. My body just started convulsing, like twitching out of control. I had no control of my body movements, and my eyes were closed, and I was having visions of like my entire life was kind of flashing before my eyes. I had visions of my ancestors, my grandparents who I had never met before, who are not alive, like future children, like really insane things, roller coaster ride of emotions. That happened for about 45 minutes, all from just like an energy entrainment. That type of experience happened twice while I was at that event. And I also saw the leader of this event, the person who invented or created this modality, perform like what I consider literal miracles. He held a wand in his hand and was able to control people just through the energy field, make them walk, sit down, stand up, and do all sorts of crazy things. So that created, I think, an opening. That was what I would consider my pre-awakening. I was still kind of spiritually completely closed off for the most part. At that time, still probably would have said crystals are dumb, like astrology isn't real. But I became open because of that experience and, of course, all the work I was doing prior to that. So then I moved to a small beach town on the Florida Panhandle. Also, shortly after I moved to Florida, I began reading books. Randomly stumbled upon a man named Paul Selig, who wrote books that were channeled by some higher dimensional beings that he referred to as the guides. This was my first foray into any sort of channeled material. I don't even know if I even believed it at the time, but what these guides were writing through this man named Paul Selig, they were writing about things like Christ consciousness and how this higher state of being is available to all of us. And anyone who's reading these books, just by you reading, we're working with your energy field and preparing you for higher states of consciousness, whether you realize it or not. I was like, I'm not really feeling anything, but I'm vibing with this message. Yeah, I'm up for raising my consciousness. This sounds pretty cool. And it leads me to my trigger event. After working with my psychoanalyst for perhaps a year at that time and experimenting with the plant medicines, primarily doing microdoses, having some smaller macrodose experiences, nothing too intense, I finally thought to myself, let's stop playing around. Let's go for the jugular and do the real medicine that I've heard many people talk about. It is very transformative. Let's do ayahuasca. So 3 months after I moved to this small town in Florida, I found myself at an ayahuasca ceremony in Orlando, Florida. It was a weekend retreat. Typically, this retreat center offers 2 ceremonies over a weekend, But I decided to take the optional third ceremony option, as I had heard it is not common to get a lot out of your first experience. You might still have a lot of blockages. So I thought, let's just load it up. And I ended up doing 3 ceremonies within 24 hours, which I only found out afterwards that is probably not very responsible. So I did 1 ceremony Friday night, 1 Saturday morning, and another one Saturday evening. So my first ceremony was essentially a warm-up. The facilitators there mandated that for anyone that it was their first time there, you can only have a starter dose. After a couple hours, if you're feeling fine, you can have more. So that happened to me, but generally it was a warm-up. Nothing too crazy happened. I sort of had this kind of funny ego death experience where I was being shown all these kind of hilarious ways that I essentially am full of shit. Like, here are all the ways I try to be cool and all this stuff. So that was kind of funny. I also experienced eternity though. If anyone has participated in such plant medicines or psychedelics, there is a very severe time distortion. And I thought to myself, wow, this is just my first ceremony and I'm already stuck in eternity. How am I supposed to do eternity 3 times? That was already looping in my mind. What's going to happen in these next ceremonies? Even though I felt myself having a good time, I already even thought like, wow, like I've spent so much time in this eternal experience. Like, do I even need these other 2 experiences? I was so naive because the next 2 experiences blew that one out of the water. Also, in the first experience, I began to, again, lose control of my body, just like that pre-awakening experience I had at this chiropractic event. My body began convulsing again, and I started thinking like, oh, I guess this is just what I do now. I lose control of my body, and my body just flies around whenever I have crazy psychedelic experiences. And also at the very end, randomly, I heard a spirit like talk to me in Spanish, which I'm half Mexican, so I understand Spanish fairly well. So some spirit just started talking to me in Spanish and said, hey, did you know you can talk to spirits? So that was an interesting thing that closed out that first experience, but generally it was unremarkable compared to my next 2. The next day, Saturday, May 28th, 2022, is the day my life can be split into pre and post, before and after that experience. That was my official trigger event. In that ceremony, after consulting my facilitator on what I should take for a dose, we decided that I will take the total dose that I took in the first ceremony that I took separately. I was going to take that combined dose all at once, which apparently just was normal. So ceremony began. The beginning of the ceremony, which is common, felt very relaxed, especially when I took a larger dose all at once. I just felt super relaxed and at peace. I was outside with a group of about 40 people who were also participating in this optional day ceremony. So it was a bit smaller group, but all the facilitators were there, all the helpers, volunteers, and so on were all watching us, making sure we were safe. I was sitting upright on my mat, and I felt the medicine start to come on a little bit stronger now. I was getting a little bit tense, I was getting a little wobbly, but at the same time, so my eyes were closed so I could have my own inward experience. For the first time, I began to experience real psychedelic visions, geometric patterns, shapes, and colors. So I thought, ooh, this is kind of cool. But at the same time, medicine was picking up really strongly. I was kind of getting nervous here. And at that moment, so they had music playing outside with some loudspeakers to kind of guide the journey and just enhance the experience, mostly ambient type music. But at this moment, things got very dark. I sensed even though my eyes were closed, I could sense coming from the music, there was like this dark green energy and it felt like a demon or something. It's just what I interpreted it as. And the music, there was a woman who began talking in this song. And it was as if everybody else like disappeared. And this music, this woman started talking directly to me through the music. And what she said was essentially, Daniel, it's time to die. Do you have any last words? Essentially, you are about to die. Bye. And naturally, I started panicking more than I ever have in my entire life. I was like struggling to the medicine. It literally felt like it was just consuming me. I was panicking, completely freaking out. The next thing I knew, I woke up lying down on my back. I blacked out. My first thought when I woke up was, I just died. And my former self died in that moment, which is why I say my life was split in 2 at that moment because of what happened from then on out. But that was far and away the scariest thing I have ever experienced. The next phase of my journey was kind of what I would call a standard ayahuasca experience. It was very healing, it was loving, getting some insights of why my life played out the way it was and some of this like emotional stuff that I was dealing with, having nice moments about people in my life, feeling just boundless love. And it was very beautiful, but generally it was just kind of this kind of standard experience for this next bit. Then things started getting really almost intense and like focused, that I almost felt the propheticness of what was happening in this moment. And I received a very like clear message. And this was the message that everything in my entire life had led me to this exact moment, this ceremony, not the ceremony last night, not the ceremony that awaits me later tonight, but this one right here. Every decision you ever made in your entire life was the right one because it got you right here, right now to have this experience. I did nothing wrong ever. In fact, I've been guided my entire life so that I would get right here. So naturally, that was pretty profound. And again, I had all sorts of body twitching throughout this ceremony. So I guess, again, it was repeating that whenever I get into these intense experiences, my body is just flailing out of control and just being tapped into some form of energy frequency that I didn't understand at the time. The next thing that happened was there was a woman who was next to me, an older woman, maybe in her early 60s. And all of us had shared our intentions prior to going into our ceremonies. And this woman had shared with the group that she was still grieving the death of her son. So her son had passed away and she wanted to heal from that experience. Both of us were now in the middle of our ceremonies and I could feel her having an experience grieving and processing the death of her son. Even though not in her mind, I just knew that that was coming up and she was very sad, she was grieving, wailing and crying. Then all of a sudden I felt the spirit of her son just appear. Even though my eyes are closed, I could just tell that this actual spirit of her son was right in front of me. And I could hear him trying to comfort her and say, it's okay, you don't have to be sorry, I love you. Amazing, beautiful stuff. To this day, I still kind of don't even understand why I was present for that. But it was an amazing, beautiful experience that I got to witness. Later on, maybe 20, 30 minutes had passed, and I sensed this woman next to me again, going deep into another process, but this time ramping it up. She was just grieving, wailing, crying, so loud, screaming, just so distraught. And the spirit of her son was still there. And I sensed him saying, this is too much. And I was feeling really overwhelmed, like, oh God, it's getting really intense. And I even said aloud, this is too much. And I was about to lose it, just completely lose control. But as soon as I spoke the sentence, this is too much, one of my facilitators literally just appeared seemingly out of nowhere with a cool towel. He placed it on my head and he said, I got you, brother. And right then and there, I calmed down. That really helped me in that moment. But I had this thought right then and there, wow, how did he know? There was literally no gap in time from when I said the phrase, I need help, or this is too much, to when he came to offer his help. I thought, how is that possible? How did he know that? And I started pondering, are the facilitators here angels? And that was just a random thought that came up in my mind at that moment. Then I also realized that there was a friend of mine back in Atlanta that I made, and the thought came up in my mind, wait, this woman is an angel too, because this friend of mine had also recently gone on a pilgrimage herself to Peru. She did ayahuasca, a bunch of other plant medicines. She was there for an extended period of time. And when she returned to Atlanta, I noticed she was completely changed, just much more at peace, calm and present. And subconsciously, I realized, whoa, it's like she's a different person in a better way. And in my ayahuasca experience, that came up, that subconsciously she influenced me to have my own ayahuasca experience. And the thought came into my mind, whoa, this woman was like my angel in a way, because she influenced me to get here so that I could open up my consciousness and have this experience. So I started having all these random thoughts about angels. Then after that experience, the whole scene changed. It went dark. It started dimming, almost like a dark movie theater where I could see the silhouettes of everybody. And again, my eyes were closed. I think I might have even been blindfolded, but I could still sense, because when you're on this medicine, you have these kind of extrasensory perceptions. I could see everything around me had gone dark. There were still people there, but they were all dimmed. And a spotlight shone on one person, on one of the facilitators, a woman. And I had begun to connect with the spirit of one of the facilitators. As we made this connection, we were talking to each other telepathically. I started asking her a bunch of these questions about angels, what is it with all these angels here? And then I asked myself, and I stopped and I said, wait a minute, am I an angel? And the response that I just said in my own mind, I said, fuck yeah, I'm an angel. And this woman, this spirit that I connected with, she said, yes, you are an angel. I had no clue what that meant, but then I proceeded to receive some very profound messages. I heard that you are an angel. Your purpose is to hold space for people and save them. I had absolutely no clue what that meant, but it seemed really profound at the time. I got the message that I had been placed exactly where I am in my life so that I could live out that purpose. Then I began to receive all sorts of messages about how my life played out perfectly, exactly as planned. I had the exact family. I have the exact friends, because those are the people who I'm meant to be serving in this life. I was placed in my exact jobs that I hated so I could bring light to them. It was all very profound and made absolutely no sense to me. I got the message that I am an angel and I was chosen to be an angel because I am strong and I can handle the burden. I am protected. Nothing can hurt me. I have a mission and I never need to worry ever again. I never needed to worry in the past, but now I definitely never need to worry ever again. I received a very big message, very important one, that said everything will be revealed at the appropriate time, some form of foreshadowing about future events. Everything in my life had a purpose. I was made exactly as I am to fulfill this purpose. My body, my shape, size, color, all of that was exactly as planned to fulfill this purpose of mine. So the spirit of this woman who I had connected with was answering questions that I was having because I was completely dumbstruck by all of that was happening. I was just completely blasted with tons of information that hardly made any sense to me. So I was just like, what is going on? And she was guiding me through it and all that. And at one point I even started like helping other people's journey by tapping into the energy field. So that was pretty cool. It was so intense that many times throughout, I even wondered, do I even need to do this ever again? Like, how am I expected to recover and go back into this space like just a few hours from now? So after that ceremony, we all gathered in our group and shared our experiences collectively thus far. And that's when I realized that something profound was happening, because when I shared my experience and hearing everyone else's, mine was 10 times crazier than anyone else's. So that made me realize something is happening here. Someone even mentioned to me after sharing that, I bet you're a starseed. And I was like, what's a starseed? Going into my final ceremony, I thought to myself, if I'm even going to participate, which I decided to do so, I'm just going to take a small dose. I don't need anything crazy again, like what just happened. And yet I still had a super wild experience. I essentially took the starter dose that I had on the first time, but given the fact that this was my third ceremony in 24 hours, I likely just had a bunch still in my system that I only needed a tiny little dose to send me off. So after the first 20 minutes of my third ceremony, randomly I found myself completely sober. I was like, what is going on here? Do I need to take more? I really didn't want to, because the ayahuasca that was served to us was the most disgusting thing I've ever put in my mouth. And I was firm that I was not going to put any more in my mouth ever again, or at least at that moment. I'm like, I'm not doing any more of this. That's enough. But I found myself confused. Like, why am I sober? Do I need to take more? I decided to just lie down, wait and see what happens. As soon as I put my blindfold back on, I connected again with the same woman that I had connected to in my ceremony prior, the spirit of this facilitator. And the first thing she said to me immediately was like, go take a second dose. I was like, what? She was like, yeah, we need your help to go save all these people. Get up and go get a second dose. So after a bunch of back and forths, I started kind of freaking out, like, what? Now I'm like questioning my decision. There was another woman who even just started like having the most intense, terrifying sounds coming out of her mouth. She was like purging, like as if she was being murdered. The spirit of this woman started talking to me. She said, I'm punishing this woman because you're not getting up and getting a second dose. Get up there, we need your help. So naturally I started panicking, freaking out. But then I remembered all that I had heard in my prior ceremony, that every decision I had ever made was the right one. I trust myself to make the right call. I don't want any more of that crap. I'm going to just suffer the consequences of whatever is going to happen here. After that, the scene changed. It got less intense, and I was told that I had passed a test. Never let anyone make any decisions for you. Always trust yourself. So that was pretty cool, but very intense and terrifying. And as a result of passing this test, I was told I would now be accepted into what I heard was called the Interdimensional Being Club. And now a bunch of interdimensional beings were going to enter the space for whatever reason. And lo and behold, I'm blindfolded, but I can sense the most powerful, epic beings, which I just referred to them in this experience as source beings. I felt like 2 or 3 of them just appear in our retreat space and just start gliding in front of me. And at this point, my body convulsed like it had never before. Like my body just like erupted. I was like, could feel their energy, and I was just flailing all over, like electric. And these beings entered the space and began going around healing all of these other people. And what I learned is why I'm convulsing all this time, these experiences, is that 1, it was allowing me to kind of tap into that energy field. 2, apparently these beings needed me to like amplify their energy. And I was also somehow beyond my consciousness, like transferring my energy to other people to help them. So for the rest of this ceremony, I could sense these beings going around our retreat space and even like on other parts of the world. And they would, anytime I could sense them healing someone else, like I would just get a zap of energy. But at the same time, I started kind of testing out this energetic frequency that I was in, and I was sort of being able to try to control it without fully like blacking out. And then I got this message from the same woman who I was connected to, her spirit. She said, yes, eventually you will be able to control this. I even was starting to control other people around me while they were throwing up, they were vomiting, purging. I like put my hands up and I said, like, stop. And 2 other people on the other side, like they immediately stopped purging. So I was super tapped in there. So that was pretty cool. This woman who was guiding me along, again, was kind of answering all these questions that I had. She was like, yes, even though what you're doing here, it seems strange. Those who need to know about this mission that you're on, no. So don't worry if no one else understands what's happening. We know what you're doing here. Even if I didn't even know what I was doing there. I had infinite number of questions, but I just kept hearing over and over again, everything will be revealed in time. And I kept asking, like, is this real? This seems too insane to be real. But the spirit of this woman, she would answer before I even finished the question, like, yes, this is real, like, stop asking. At the very end, I felt these source beings like leave the space in the way that they entered. And on the way out, they mentioned to me that they were Paul Selig's guides, and they were drawn to me. They found me by me reading his books. So that is the gist of my trigger event. After I left that event, I went back home to my town here in Florida, and I just felt amazing. I thought, like, I am chosen, I'm enlightened. I just felt completely on cloud 9, full of bliss, joy. I felt like my heart had been blasted open. I was feeling, it was almost as if my personality had completely changed just from that. I was feeling much more loving and caring, just nicer. So I felt amazing for about that next month. But also I wondered, was that even real? What the heck was that? And what do I even do with all of this? That was just so insane. How am I supposed to make sense of all of this? I even thought to myself then that this is going to take the rest of my life to unpack all that happened there. So afterwards, I was still feeling great, but my body was acting very strange. I was randomly just activating with energy. I'd be standing at my desk, working my remote job still, and like my face would just come alive with energy, or half my entire lower body would just start activating like it was on fire, or like I was in a freezer or something. There was just a lot of strange things happening to my body. Some of the twitching was still happening randomly. My eyes felt like they had bugs crawling in them. It was just very strange. So I was curious, like, what's going on here? Started doing some research on the internet to try to find some answers. I ultimately landed on the fact that I might be having a Kundalini awakening. I don't know what that is, but maybe that's what's happening to me. It's the only thing that kind of fits my symptoms here, because so much has happened that I'm just kind of seeking some answers here. Then I decided to watch a video that had approached my awareness in months past, but I realized I wasn't ready for it. There's a man who's somewhat well known in spiritual circles by the name of Matthias de Stefano. He claimed that he was aware and remembered all of his past lives, even on other planets. So I saw this show up on my YouTube feed once, and I remember thinking months prior, I'm not ready for that. That seems too out there, maybe later. After my ayahuasca experience, I decided it's time to watch this. So I watched an interview with Matthias de Stefano. He explained how he's remembering all of his past lives in ancient Egypt, on other planets, and he's explaining how the universe works and reality works. I was like, I can sense something in here is real, because I just tapped into this experience on ayahuasca. Something here is real. I decided to dive further. He has a series on the Gaia streaming network that I watched the entire thing, where he explains all various dimensions and how reality works. He was explaining how basically all of that we're experiencing is a projection of the first dimension, which is this original source of consciousness, and all of this is a hologram. I was like completely confused, but at the same time, like, no, this is real. I think this is real. Like, I just had an experience, tapped into something like this. So I was noodling on that. Then I found another woman who puts out a lot of spiritual material, and she was explaining the same information, but from a completely different vantage point. And these two people, I could tell they had never met before. So I sensed the pattern, like, oh God, this has to be real. Like, they're talking about things in the exact same manner from completely different angles though. And I had the moment where, if you've seen the movie The Matrix, where Morpheus explains the truth of the reality that he had lived in, what the Matrix is, to Neo. And Neo finally makes that realization that he'd lived in this false reality to be a power source for these robots. And he just has a complete mental breakdown.
No. I don't believe it. It's not possible.
I didn't say it would be easy, Neo. I just said it would be the truth.
Stop. Let me out. Let me out. I want out.
Easy, Neo. Easy.
Get this thing. Don't touch me. Get away from me. Stay away from me. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't believe it.
It's gonna pop.
Breathe, Neo. Just breathe.
I had literally that exact experience. Once I had put two and two together, I realized that none of this is real. This is all a hologram. I'm just a projection of an infinite consciousness inside of a body right now. And I literally fell to the floor in my living room, my hands in my face, sort of laughing at the same time, but my reality was completely shattered. That night, I believe, when I went to sleep, I began receiving for the next 3 weeks straight, while I was sleeping, downloads straight into my head. It was as if like a fire hose was just cramming a bunch of energy, information into my head every single night while I was sleeping for about 3 weeks. I was just like having dreams that were just like information just being jammed into my mind. I don't know what I was downloading. It wasn't anything scary, but I was like, I think I'm downloading something. So that happened for about 3 weeks. But then one night I had sleep paralysis, where while I was sleeping again, I was like half awake, half asleep, and I heard a voice in my room that sounded like some sort of Joker gesture, like laughing. Then I had sleep paralysis, felt like something landing, sitting on my chest. It was like gasping for air. I was about to choke or suffocate. Woke up, like that was pretty intense. But then I had this really profound dream that was very meaningful, because I'd been working on a lot of dreams with my psychoanalyst at the time. So I was like, that was kind of scary, but I had a really profound dream, so I didn't think too much of it. Then in July of 2022, I went to a festival that was pretty conscious. It was high vibe. I ended up meeting for the first time a lot of people who had gone through some similar experiences. I realized like, oh, maybe what I just experienced isn't that crazy. So I began meeting a lot of like-minded people, had an amazing time. When I returned home, I started having thoughts in my mind like, I'm feeling pretty good. Like, I feel like enlightened again. I don't think I need this therapy work that I've been doing. I think I'm going to tell my psychoanalyst that we're done here, like our time is finished. Thank you for your service. And that night, after returning from this festival, I again had something kind of touch my body while I was sleeping, picked me up in the dream state, and showed me a new dream that was, again, really profound and meaningful. It was the exact symbolic representation that I was done with that therapeutic work. And yes, it's time to move on. And so I ended up sharing that with my analyst the next morning. We ended our time working together. Again, I was like, something touched me while I was sleeping. That was kind of weird. But again, I got this super meaningful dream. Then just a few nights after that, this is where things got really intense. I was sleeping and I found myself in some weird dream state. This time I felt some form of entity touch my genitals. And naturally, while I was sleeping, I was just in the dream. I was like, no, get off me. This is really weird. Stop touching me. Then it was grabbing at my arm, like almost like pulling at me, like, come over here. I was like, no. And then I just noped out of that dream and I woke myself up. And that's when I was like, okay, what is happening here? What is going on? Something is in my room. That's when I started panicking. And that was what I consider the beginning of a deep and terrifying dark night of the soul. For the next month, I had the most absolutely terrifying dreams. I was convinced that I brought home a demon with me, or there was just like a demon entity in my home that was terrorizing me. I was having terrifying dreams, seeing some like dark entity like right up in my face as if it was murdering me or something, just being like waterboarded with all sorts of really intense, violent dreams. I was terrified of going to sleep every night. At the same time, it was as if my body had just completely shut down. I would sleep for 12 hours and I would still wake up being completely exhausted for that entire month. And I was having all sorts of crazy physical symptoms, huge amount of headaches. My head was throbbing almost every day harder than it had ever been before. The eye things were bothering me again. My body was aching randomly. I was also kind of diving deep into like researching and reading a lot of spiritual content because I was just devouring information. I really wanted to know what was happening. I was just in full, complete overwhelm. And I seriously thought I was going to die. Like this demon in my home was going to devour me. I really thought this thing was going to like suck me into a black hole or something. It was absolutely terrifying. So after about a month of really terrifying experiences, mainly while I was sleeping, I was like scared to go to sleep every night, just scared to even be in the dark. As I was learning information, understanding the nature of reality, that there's only one consciousness, we're all a fractal of that. So basically everything is me, everything is you, like it's just one. So I started to realize like, oh, whatever this being entity that's terrorizing me, like it's just me. And I started reverting back to my messages on my ayahuasca experience, which I still had no clue really what they meant. So I thought, well, I was told I was an angel. If I'm an angel, then I'm also a demon. If I'm the light, then I'm also the darkness. And as soon as I kind of made that internal realization, everything shifted. And I no longer experienced that level of terror ever again. So that brought a little bit of relief. But for the next 2 months after that, things did not get any better. For about 3 months, I experienced the absolute hardest period of my entire life where I really thought I was either going to die most days, I wanted to die many times, or I thought my brain was just going to have an aneurysm from the amount of sheer overwhelm that I was experiencing. Again, I was having many physical ailments, really severe headaches, body aches of all kinds. I had intense allergy flare-ups that perhaps I might have been detoxing at that time from all the energetic influxes I was receiving. One time I even woke up randomly in the middle of the night with one of my fingers throbbing with the most extreme, severe pain I've ever felt in any part of my body. I had no clue why this happened, but it was so painful that I legitimately contemplated having it amputated because my thought was, well, if I don't have a finger, there will be no pain. That's how much pain I was experiencing. So random things like that were happening to me that just I had no clue how to deal with. I did all of the healing things I could think of, trying to support myself, take care of my body. None of it worked. I was also having a lot of still crazy experiences while I was sleeping in these alternate dimension dream spaces. Some of them were kind of cool, but they were just very intense. One time I had what felt like a complete Kundalini activation where I was in this trippy alternate dimension dream space and I felt literally in my physical body a surge of energy start from the base of my spine and just come all the way up my spine, up to my head, out through my crown. And I woke up, I was like, whoa, I think I just got a Kundalini activation. Another time, something I felt literally like an arm wrap around my body while I was sleeping, like kind of hold me tight and then like electrocute me with a huge burst of energy, and I could hear an audible sound, almost like an engine just turned on. So that was really intense. I was just having all sorts of crazy things. I didn't feel healthy for more than maybe 3 days in a row. So for that entire 3-month period, I really thought I was going to die. At times I really wanted to. I even contemplated it semi-seriously. So it was a very intense 3-month period. In the midst of all of that craziness, though, I found myself at having a healing session with a woman here in where I live in Florida who was recommended to me. I knew I just needed to take all the help that I could get. So I found myself in a session with this woman. I just laid on a table for an hour. She was speaking all sorts of languages that I didn't understand, just touching her hands on me, giving me crystals. None of it made any sense to me. But at the very end, she said, by the way, I have your spirit guides here. Do you have any questions for them? I was completely thrown off by that. At the time, doing some of this research, I had become aware that we have spirit guides. They help us on our journeys and whatnot, but I had no clue you could actually talk to them. So she was like, do you have any questions? I'm like, who are they? She began channeling information, eyes closed. She said something along the lines of, yes, you are working with ascended masters and archangels of all kinds. They are here to support you on your mission. I was like, okay. They said, you're being fast-tracked through your awakening. I'm like, yeah, you think? And they also said, you chose this. And at that moment, I was like, dang it, I thought that might be the case. As I had come to understand that on some level of my consciousness, I had chose to have this experience. After leaving that healing session, that's when I knew, okay, something truly profound is happening with me. This is beyond me. And I left pretty overwhelmed just by that. The contrast of my own life prior to this point in this phase, where I just felt generally kind of mediocre, living a pretty unremarkable life, and all of a sudden I'm getting all of this information that I felt almost like chosen in a sense by these higher dimensional godlike beings. It was just, honestly, it was too much, and I was really overwhelmed in a positive way by just so much gratitude, like, wow, I'm being opened up to something that's truly profound beyond me. So that was a lot to process there as well. In October of 2022, I found myself at an event that I was called to go to, a 5-day retreat in Sedona, Arizona, where things started to kind of cool down a bit. I think whatever was happening realized, like, I think he could deserve a little bit of a break. So I found myself meeting some other like-minded people, which was very meaningful at this event. The main peak experience was I had a breathwork experience, another ceremony with everyone engaged in holotropic breathwork. In that peak of that experience, I found myself almost again in a very similar experience as my ayahuasca experience, where I found myself body all out of control, could barely control anything, but again, tapped into another level of frequency, and I sensed more beings were there to, again, start this whole healing thing again. And that's when I got a huge download, a more clarity on some of those ayahuasca messages that I received, that this is why I'm here. I'm meant to be a physical conduit of energy for some of these higher dimensional beings. They need me here in the physical to like transfer some of this energy in these spaces. And I learned that I'm living out my purpose just by being on that mat, in that experience. I didn't need to do anything. I didn't need to go save the whales or anything. I was living my purpose just by being there. That was a hugely profound and meaningful experience to just have that kind of validation that, who I am, there's nothing wrong with me type of thing. And it was very meaningful. I cried harder than I ever had in my entire life. That was a very meaningful experience. When I returned from that, not long after that, in December of 2022, I found that I was going to be let go from my corporate remote job that I had somehow managed to stay employed during that entire crazy period. But I found out, almost as a cosmic joke, that to top it all off of having my entire reality shattered, you're also going to lose your source of income. So 2022 was the year that everything was flipped upside down for me. Had my reality shattered, lost my job, lost all my friends, lost everything. So 2022 was easily the most challenging year of my life, but it did not get any easier after that. So I'm starting 2023 with a clean slate, no job. I figured it would have been wise to just take some time, rest, try to integrate all that happened rather than try to go out and find a new job or a new outward purpose. I thought that would have been really irresponsible. What I was called to do was to participate and have what is called a QHHT session, quantum healing hypnosis technique. It is a modality where one goes under hypnosis and is able to connect to their highest aspect, their oversoul, their superconscious, their higher self. And this part of our consciousness has all of the answers, apparently. And I thought, I have so many questions about all that happened to me last year. So I had a QHHT session with a local hypnotist. I brought about 50 questions that I had about what the heck just happened to me, literally what the actual fuck was all of that I experienced last year. In the beginning of my hypnosis session, I found myself seeing visions of a TV show that I used to watch called Attack on Titan. It is a Japanese anime, and I kept wondering, like, why am I seeing visions of this show over and over again? And the message I was receiving is that my life and what's happening on the earth is shown, disclosed, revealed in this TV show. It is about a society that is literally caged by walls. There's a bunch of monsters that are trying to get them. And the main character, his story arc follows my story arc, my life arc. He had a bunch of dormant abilities that were injected into him at a very young age, which that mirrored my own life. When I was younger, I had growth hormone injections regularly so that I would grow taller. And this message I was receiving is that you're literally following this life arc. You're here with a bunch of dormant abilities that are going to be coming online. And you're here to save and help and assist with this reality that's been literally caged by walls. So I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting. And then I proceeded to have my hypnotist ask me all the questions while I was in this hypnotic state, where this higher aspect of me came forth and answered all of these questions, who was having a great time laughing at all my hilarious, human self type of questions, because this part of me had all of the answers and had a great perspective. So I was asking, what the heck were all these messages I received on ayahuasca about, being an angel and my purpose and all that? Like, can you tell me, like, what is my purpose at a soul level? And the response that I received, just a single sentence: my purpose at a soul level is to awaken humanity. So that was pretty interesting. And I will do that in this lifetime, just through my own vibration and by living as my own authentic self. And I learned that my soul is indeed from the angelic realms. I had also asked, why was my awakening so intense? Why did I think I was going to die almost every day for months on end? I got a pretty funny answer. Essentially, I chose to just rip the Band-Aid off. The message I received was that essentially there's a fast option, there's a medium option, or there's a slow option. Metaphorically, you can see a therapist once a week, but that takes years to do all of that healing and development work. Or you can just take dynamite and blow it all to hell right away, all in one go. My soul chose the dynamite option. One big question I had is, okay, I just lost my job, my entire reality was shattered. Now what? Like, what do I do next after all of this? Before my hypnosis session, almost a year in advance, I had purchased a ticket to Envision Festival, a conscious music festival in Costa Rica that was to come in the following month after that hypnosis session. The answer I received from this higher aspect of me was, I just need to go to Envision Festival, dance my ass off, and then you'll know what to do. Because when you're in flow, when you're moving your body, you know what to do. So I guess this higher aspect of me didn't want to give me all the answers. That wrapped up my hypnosis session. I was basically just kind of integrating my experiences from the past year, taking things easy, resting, integrating, diving deep into all of the rabbit holes of the repressed truths of our world and off the world. Then I found myself at this Envision Festival. And on the 5th day, I had already been wondering, like, okay, I'm supposed to have some crazy life-changing experience and nothing had happened yet. Then on the 5th night, I found myself at an ecstatic dance with the assistance of a special substance. At this ecstatic dance, I experienced what I will call the peak experience of my entire life to this day. As soon as the music started, I found myself just tapping in to a completely different frequency. And as the music started, my body was completely synced to the music, and I began basically transmuting the energy within that space. Like just a complete ninja. My eyes were closed. My body would move completely in sync to what the DJ was doing. If he would switch the energy to something more positive, I would be calling in energy that was more positive and supportive to the people. I could sense certain people had some darkness, shadowy type energy, so I would rip it out of them. I would create this like energetic dome. All of this was completely subconscious. My ego mind like wasn't even there. I was pulling in like divine heavenly energies from the skies, slamming them down into the earth. It was the coolest thing I had ever done in my entire life. The only thing that made sense to me is that I was running a program, literally not even thinking about anything. Maybe it's something that I had downloaded in one of my prior experiences, but it felt like I was just on autopilot, completely synced, in tune, having this incredibly profound experience. When I came down from that, or after that ecstatic dance had ended, I got this kind of faint message in my mind that said, this is why you're here. You're the only one of us who could handle being in a body and do what you just did. I had no clue who that was. I think maybe it could have been some angelic team of mine that was giving me some feedback. But that was a peak experience. I ended up 2 nights later at that festival having the same type of experience again, just tapped in on a completely different level. I sensed like the womb traumas of all the women in the crowd that I was in, just transmuting all of that, some earthly pains and all of that. Incredibly profound. And now I see what my higher aspect was telling me in my hypnosis session, because that was life-changing. So after these peak experiences that I had at Envision Festival, I felt like I had fully landed after just 9 months ago starting my trigger event, deep dark night of the soul, completely having my reality shattered. Just 9 months later, I felt like, boom, I have landed. I understand. I am here on a mission. I have some abilities. Like, let's move forward. From being completely asleep to fully awake in 9 months. Like, that was a really quick, fast turnaround. And I realized after that, okay, I have some abilities here that I don't understand, but I need to explore these more. And there seems to be a correlation with moving my body and music. Music has been the one thing in my life even when I was growing up, very emotionally repressed, music was the only thing that would make me feel anything. So it was after those experiences at that festival that I decided to train and learn how to be a DJ specifically for ecstatic dance. So a couple of months later, I decided to take a training in Bali, Indonesia, for a month to learn how to facilitate ecstatic dance and to learn how to DJ. The energy in Bali is very intense. It is known as somewhat of an energetic vortex. And while I was there, it was the first time I really started feeling some really intense things about my experience and realizing I'm not from this planet. Some things were finally starting to coalesce and make sense. I am not from here. And not only am I not from here, I want to go home. I miss my family. I don't know who they are, but I've never met them in this life. I miss them and I want to go home. So that was a really intense experience. So I returned home from my experience in Bali thinking like, all right, I've got this mission. Here's what I'm going to do. And in reality, I still had more Dark Night of the Soul experiences awaiting me. I returned home to another bout of severe exhaustion for like an entire month. My body just shut down again, a bunch of physical ailments. And I began what I have since been in almost up until now, as the time I'm recording this video, a very drawn out and intense hermit phase. I was just left to my own devices to face myself, doing a lot of shadow work, having actual shadow parts of me like visit me while I'm sleeping in pretty dramatic fashion, doing all sorts of healing, basically an intense, drawn out process of the death of my ego. I had more physical purges, more physical detoxing that was like showing up as flu-like symptoms. I had a really intense sacral purge where it felt like I was going to pass a kidney stone, or I was having a UTI, or one of my internal organs was going to rupture. So the intensity did not slow down. Simultaneously, it was mixed with just a maddening amount of boredom. There was another about 3-week period at the end of 2023 where I was feeling really anxious. I realized I want to leave this reality. I want to get out of here as fast as possible. Again, kind of dipped into that mode where I'm like, I really just don't want to be in this body. I don't want to be in this reality. Please make it stop. Thankfully, I made it through that. But generally, I did almost nothing externally since I returned from that retreat in Bali. I've had a couple other excursions, but generally, I've been in this intense hermit phase basically since I moved here to Florida for about 3 years now. I realized at one point during the middle of last year that I'm still in my dark night of the soul. I was pretty much fire hosed from all angles for about 2 years straight. But I knew that this was all for a higher purpose. I had more sensitivities coming online. My perceptions were expanding. I was becoming more tapped in to energies, the divine, spirit realm, the ebbs and flows of the cycles of the earth and the cosmos. So I could see, as frustrating as it was to my ego, that this was really serving me. It was just part of my expansion process. I was essentially in the liquefaction phase inside of a cocoon, undergoing the process of a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. At about the end of 2024, I experienced my first month of what felt like not having a crazy intense experience for at least a month amount of time. So I thought, okay, I think I might be ending this phase. Which leads me to just last month of the time that I'm recording this video. In February of 2025, I went on a pilgrimage to Sacred Valley, Peru for a men's retreat pilgrimage. And I knew as soon as I got the invite for this experience that this was going to be the symbolic closing out of that phase, because one of the main elements of this pilgrimage were going to be 3 sacred plant medicine ceremonies with Wachuma, also known as San Pedro, which is a masculine plant spirited energy, which was a very romantic way of closing out the chapter that started with a feminine ayahuasca experience. And I went to Peru, had crazy activations on top of some mountains there, and I returned home, and I can tell I've closed out that phase of awakening where now I realize it is time for me to move forward, which is why I'm here speaking in front of you, engaging publicly, sharing my experiences, stepping out publicly. That leads me to where I am now today.
You stop following me? Who are you?
The question is, who are you?
I thought I knew. Now I'm not so sure.
You have forgotten who you are.
There is one last nugget I will leave you with. Going back to my trigger event, ayahuasca ceremony, where I experienced a terrifying moment of death, and the music began speaking to me directly, the song that was playing at that moment is forever seared into my consciousness. The retreat center posted their playlist of the music they were playing during our ceremonies. I checked it out so I could find that specific song. And ironically, it is quite a nice song. As I mentioned, there was a woman who began speaking to me through the vocals of this song that I was going to die. But listen to what the lyrics were at that exact moment.
Breathe long and slow. Remember who you truly are.
As I mentioned, that ceremony is when my life can be split in two. While I experienced what felt to me like literal death, it was also the exact moment I began to remember who I am. You can't make that up. Only the divine could have such precision.
Remember who you are. You are my son and the one true king. Remember who you are.
So that is the detailed yet still very high level overview of my spiritual awakening. I hope you found it interesting. Many times after sharing some of these experiences with people, they would always say, wow, that's a crazy story. Keep me updated. Like, this is so cool. I'm so excited for you. Let me tell you, this has been the craziest shit like anyone I've ever heard of having to live through. So I hope it was enjoyable for you. I'm doing all of this for you, for your entertainment. But seriously, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it interesting. Leave a comment if anything resonated with you. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.